welcome to another episode of Sage Cigarettes Presents The Ghost in the Magazine. I'm Steph.
And I'm Elle.
I'm so happy to be here with Elle because I miss her. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we are covering Ed and Lorraine Warren this month. And so we started it off with a little movie called The Conjuring. And I was super happy about it.
Yeah, totally thrilled.
So, The Conjuring is based on a true story, and anybody who is a fan of movies like that know that it does not mean that everything that happened is exactly as it happened in real life. It means they took a basic idea from something that happened and then turned it into something else. And that's something that you have to remain conscious of if Ed and Lorraine Warren are involved.
To be fair, Ed and Lorraine Warren kind of did that with reality.
That's valid. And we're going to get into it. Okay, so this movie is based off of the Perron family. They're a family of 7. They've got a whole gang of kids. And what I think is interesting is that this takes place in Rhode Island. I was born in Rhode Island. I was born in Providence. And I always used to say as a kid, I'll never live in Providence because that whole state is haunted. Most New England towns are haunted because they've been there since the dawn of America. They've been around, they've seen some things. Rhode Island is the size of a thumb in comparison to other states. So I think that's very interesting. What I don't think is interesting is the reason this house is haunted. Very, very much bothers me. So they move into this house that they bought on auction, and let me tell you, they ignored several red flags. First of all, I would say don't buy your house in auction, only because that's how they unload haunted houses. And in Rhode Island, they do not have to disclose if there was any paranormal activity reported in a house before they sell it to you. They don't have to do that. It's because every house is haunted. So that's the first red flag. Second, their dog wouldn't go inside. And I'm sorry, but if my dog won't come inside a building, we're leaving. And that's it. Dogs are very smart. Okay. Animals can sense things that we cannot. So they ignored that. One thing I noticed this time around while watching it that I didn't notice before. So the girls play this game called Hide and Clap, which I think sounds super fun. It's like a really bitch and twist on hide and seek. So you can ask, whoever is doing the seeking can ask for 3 claps. So they move closer, like Marco Polo, but no water involved. And while they're playing this in the house, they bust a hole through the wall. And it just immediately gave me Exorcist vibes because, you know, they went into the attic and then Captain Howdy started getting howdy. That was despicable. So I'm like, okay, inciting incident. They break a hole in the wall and then now they realize that there's a cellar down there. And I don't personally understand why the cellar is important.
It's spooky.
That's dumb.
Well, the other thing is, I guess, with getting it from an auction, but I just don't know how any property trades hands without being able to access the furnace. The furnace was down there because he says the next day, oh, I'm going to try to get the furnace working. So you didn't know that there was even a furnace to begin with, dude?
Yeah, that's sketchy. You look really pressed.
I guess overnight had blocked out the Bathsheba and that whole storyline, which is...
We're going to talk about that because we covered a movie over 31 Days of Horror that had that whole witch element and it just doesn't work. So weird things start happening. The mom wakes up covered in bruises. I'm really going to gloss over the plot because it's a basic bitch plot. So she wakes up with bruises all the time. She's like, oh, it's an iron deficiency. I love how concerned the dad is about it. I did think that was sweet. Their couple story, I'm into it. I like that. I buy it. He's like, make sure you see a doctor. So she starts taking iron pills. One of the daughters sleepwalks, which I always think is a fun element, like in Sinister, when one of the kids sleepwalks. And so they just gently put her back to bed. But then one of the girls like wakes up in the night because she keeps getting her foot yanked, which I think is the scariest shit ever. And she like sees someone in the room. And then at another point, like there's a ghost on top of the wardrobe, jumps on top of the girl. So weird shit's happening, right? And the mom is so pressed that she hunts the Warrens down, right? And here's a funny thing. I'm watching this lecture, right? They give 2 lectures in this movie, which stop showing them giving lectures, okay? They're not science people. Like in a school, it's not a reputable source, especially given their
alleged
for lying and doing bad things. But what I thought was funny in the second lecture, when they pan up to show the Perron mom, Lorraine Warren's old ass is in the crowd. Actual Lorraine Warren sitting there looking 100 years old, and I never noticed her there before.
Yeah, she has that cameo.
She's no M. Night Shyamalan. No Stephen King.
She's a very good grifter.
Allegedly.
She's a famous grifter. That's what the Warrens are. They're con men.
Allegedly.
And for all the pent up anger that I have towards the Warrens come from a kid who was so obsessed with the occult and so obsessed with scary stories. And Amityville was my favorite thing. And I found out it was all a hoax and I hated the Warrens. I have a grudge. Why lie about that shit? I know why now, because they made money off of it. Just as somebody who has always been obsessed with and just loves the paranormal, the Warrens cheapen it.
This is what I've been waiting for.
The way that they portray their relationship in this movie, it's like saccharine and sickening. Actually, when they tried to make these movies, the studio got sued by a lady who's like, hey, by the way, I was a teenager living in the Warren house, having a sexual relationship with Ed. They pontificate and everything's a demon and everything's spiritual warfare. Meanwhile, he knocks this girl up and they force her to get an abortion.
Allegedly.
They're just the lowest. Back in the day, I just got bad vibes. And then I go down rabbit holes reading. And every time I start reading about them, it's like a new terrible thing I find out that they've done. And it doesn't surprise me because they're fucking just awful. Where's the bottom of this awful chasm that is the Warrens?
Well, it should be now because they're both dead.
But I'm sure that they've hidden a lot more that people are going to uncover. I'm going to say allegedly, I'm allowed to not like someone because apparently one of their relatives, they still have a foundation and they're litigious as hell. So
Yes,
don't
they
come
have
sue
a
our
whole-
podcast because we have no money.
We sure don't. And you can't have my crystals, okay? Yeah, so it's going to come up again because after watching The Devil Made Me Do It, which it's going to be week 3, that was when I started to become really unsettled by the way that they portrayed their relationship. As someone who, pretty sure I said it last episode, I've said it in a bunch of episodes, I'm not a fan of romance, not necessarily in real life, but sometimes. It's not my preferred method of entertainment. I don't care about that. It just doesn't do it for me. I want to be so scared I don't sleep that night. That's my preferred. And I think that a lot of times romance is a completely unnecessary element in horror. Sex is a much used element, and it's one I can appreciate when it is done okay. But as humans know, love is not needed for sex. So The Devil Made Me Do It should have been so much more. And yeah, we'll talk about it later. But that aspect of it is not cool. And you know what? I keep wanting to say Patrick Stewart, and that's not right. I love Patrick Wilson as an actor.
love Patrick Stewart, though.
I mean, yes, who doesn't? And if you don't, I don't want to know about it. Don't you come and at us with that shit. But I love Patrick Wilson. I think he's kind of dreamy, honestly, with his little swoopy hair and his slacks. But, and I also love Vera Farmiga, the woman who plays Lorraine Warren. I am kind of in love with her. And I love her sister in American Horror Story. They look so much alike. It's startling. And at first I thought that was her mom. And then I Googled it and I was like, oh, okay. I see you, sis. They're lovely to look at. I think they're very captivating on screen. But when you think about who they're representing, like,
if they would have just changed the names of the people and not made it about the Warrens, I don't know. I hate the baddie in this, but other than that, I might have enjoyed the movie kind of.
Well, I can say this movie scared me. Not this last time that I watched it. Well, okay. The end of this movie, always, it never fails to stress me out, okay? You know I'm afraid. You know I don't like this.
The exorcisms, yeah.
Yes, it just makes me uncomfortable. And like when they have her tied to the chair and she's spitting blood and stuff, that scene where the sheet rips half down her face and you see, okay, just it scares me. So now reverse for a second because it's not her face. It turns out that they were doing this quote unquote research, and on screen Lorraine was saying all of these things so matter of factly, like this house was owned by a woman named Bathsheba. She's a descendant of so and so who was tried for being a witch in Salem. So she is a witch, and also she had a baby and sacrificed it and then proclaimed her love to Satan and hung herself. So I did the most minute of research. There is zero evidence that Bathsheba was a witch at all. And her baby did die. And when they did the autopsy, there was a puncture wound to the baby's skull. And so they're like, oh, well, she must have killed it with a large sewing needle. But that doesn't necessarily mean she sacrificed her baby to Satan. We don't know if that's what happened. That's just what they surmise. And also, women suffer from postpartum depression. And
That's
in
what
that
I was
time,
thinking.
at that time, it was probably largely glossed over by men
Mm-hmm.
who were the doctors at that time, which I am not condoning killing your babies. But once
Mm-hmm.
again, you don't know. Nobody knows that that's what happened. And so the reason they came to that conclusion is because Lorraine Warren decided the mom was telling her a story about how she was taking a nap and she felt a sharp pain in her calf and it was a perfect concentric circle. And Lorraine said, oh, it had to have been Bathsheba. She took the sewing needle with her into the afterlife and she stabbed you with it. Bitch, what? This is actual things that Lorraine did. So they put these ideas into
Mm-hmm.
this family, and they had supernatural experiences, but they lived in that house for 10 years from 1970 to 1980.
That's not how psychics work either. Like, if you have a psychic that's just gonna read you off the fucking 200-year history of some shit, which I mean, I'm over exaggerating, but you need to have some damn alarm bells that go off if that's the case. Because there is research that can be done to prove some of the things, but you don't just sit there and spew a bunch of shit and conjecture. And again, this is the problem I have with Ed Warren. His wife and him had very similar behavior patterns. It's like a half-ass. Whatever they can do to con you into getting scared so that they can find some way to build a story, package it, and make money. It's so frustrating to me. And is Bathsheba a witch or is she a demon? Because according to the fucking Warrens, everything's a goddamn demon. And the supernatural powers that they're attributing to things is just not, it's so frustrating. There's so many holes. You can't really blame the family because they're asking an expert, quote unquote, for help. This movie, I should have enjoyed it. I should have put my stuff aside, but I have an enormous amount of butthurt about the Warrens.
Once you know those things, it's really hard to put that stuff aside because that's honestly most of what I thought about while I watched it this time, except for the end. I was stressed. I watched this movie over 3 days. I'm still, I just moved and I've been waiting for my TV to get here. So I was watching pieces of it on my phone, which is entirely not scary, but I got to watch the end of this with my giant TV and my sound bar hooked up. So I heard everything. So now the parts about the possession movies that I don't like, the eyes, the demon eyes scare the fuck out of me. And I don't know what it is. Like, oh, full Evil Dead remake with the fucking eyes. And the Evil Dead remake is phenomenal, but I can't watch it at night. And I usually can't watch The Conjuring either. Literally, I was telling someone today, the last time I watched this movie, it was about 2 years ago, and I was with my friend, and it was October, spooky season, and we were trashed. And she was like, let's watch The Conjuring. And I was like, bitch, you better not fall asleep. And she fell asleep, and I was waiting hours to sober up enough to get the fuck out of there and go home because I was so scared. So the thing that really scares me genuinely about this is that the way they spun Bathsheba is that she possesses the mother, she feeds off of them until they're weak enough for her to possess them, and then she goes after their children. And that's terrifying to me. So the way that this bitch broke that fucking chair she was tied to, I'm sorry I'm being so aggressive, it's just so scary to me. And I'm rarely scared, you know what I mean? And she broke that chair when she heard that little girl under the fucking floor, and she took off after her and had every intention of killing her. Just takes my breath away, just the way she looked. And then here's the part that just ruins it. Okay, I always say the reason why The Exorcist bothers me so much is that there's no resolution. There's a whole lot more than that because that movie is fucked up. And don't worry, everyone, we're going to do a whole possession month and you can hear everything I have to say about The Exorcist as I'm re-traumatized. This one has a resolution, but it's a stupid resolution because the power of Christ compels you, not the power of Lorraine Warren touching your forehead and going, remember that day at the beach, remember. And then boom, she's not possessed anymore. What happened to the demon after that? What happened to her? Because there's no way that a mother's love. This isn't Harry Potter.
It's a corny, half-assed resolution. Actually, I was just listening to a podcast that was talking about when Jesus exorcised demons, he had mercy and he put this unclean spirits
Into
into
the pig.
pigs. And
Yeah,
the pigs
and they
went
ran off
down
a cliff.
rather than going into the abyss, because the spirits are intelligent beings in some way, shape, or form. Ed has a very bad, and I don't know how much of this is the writers of this movie, but based on what I know of him, it seems pretty on point. He has a very black and white, not a very nuanced way of looking at it. Immediately, he says it's an inhuman spirit, like as soon as Ed Warren walks into that house. And an inhuman spirit is not necessarily demonic. This is something his mythos is putting on it. We're in this black and white version of the Christian mythos that Ed and Lorraine Warren lived in, and it was just designed to scare people and make money. That's all it was designed for.
But that's literally what Christianity was designed for, to scare people and make money.
That's what it has been whittled into, correct. And that's what the Warrens did, and it was heartbreaking to me. You know, I was one of these dorks that thought I was going to be a parapsychologist when I grew up.
Me too. And we talked about the ghost shows before, and I talked about Paranormal State, which was, it's highly disappointing to learn about the Warrens in this way because of how many times Ryan had Lorraine come on Paranormal State. And I still stand by that show because he was so respectful, but she just kind of ruins all the episodes that she was in.
There we go. We're looking at something that we love that they just come in and they just taint it.
So I want to point out, when Ed was doing that lecture, he's saying that there were 3 steps to a demonic takeover: infestation, oppression, and possession.
There's more than that. He probably threw 2 of them together.
So oppression and obsession.
Yeah. Because
he's making them seem like spiritual roaches.
The other thing that I don't like about his idea of how demonic possession takes up is he's like, it's people that are weak and don't believe in God, and that it was their fault for not like going to church or whatever. But this mostly happens with religious people. If you don't believe in this shit, they don't bother with you. At least if we're going with Christian mythology, right? They're supposed to be turning you away from God.
So yes. But according to John Constantine, just because you don't believe in the devil doesn't mean the devil doesn't believe in you.
But according to case studies of demonic possession, these are people who are religious that do this. You don't see a whole lot of atheists getting demonically possessed because, for one thing, the people around them aren't likely to think that they're demonically possessed.
Yes. So this is actually, I hate to keep bringing The Exorcist up. It's a huge thing in The Exorcist because they weren't religious. The entry came from a Ouija board. And what I can say just from like my personal experience with a religious family and religion and whatever, my family has always explained it as, you know, when you're sad, and not just sad, but like deeply, deeply sad, like depressed, it opens a little doorway in your heart that basically demons can just fucking kick down and take you.
The most heinous exorcism case I can think of is like Annalise Mitchell, and she was definitely obsessed with religion. If you're focused on that, and especially people that are focused on like, I'm destroying my soul or my family or something, there's more at stake for them too.
Yeah. It just makes them like extra tasty. I guess.
I just feel like there's so many shades of gray in a lot of these things. And I know that they can't show that in a movie. I'm not completely stupid. This is just like some gross saccharine glossing over of the Warrens, who also lived with no nuance, but lived an entire ass life and damaged a lot of people in the process.
It's true.
It's depressing. Of the many things that depress me, this movie is one of them.
Well, you better be careful and you better close that depression door at night. Also, would recommend being high while watching scary movies, especially possession ones. I will be baked out of my skull when we finally get around to The Exorcist. I have found, and I am not a doctor, children, but for me personally and my particular flavor of neurodivergence, when I am high, I can separate the fear from like analyzing the movie. And I just ate my edible too late last night and I felt everything. Final thoughts?
Say, the good things about this movie, I think it captured like that 70s aesthetic really well. It was pretty. The music was kind of good. I like the house actually. Like I would live in that house and I would just bless the shit out of it and not worry about it.
You just call your friends. Like, there's safety in numbers. We can bless the fuck out of that house. Good things about the movie for me. The end is scary. So as much as it stresses me out, I love a good fear. The dads were kind of smoking in a daddy way. Loved the hair, loved the pants.
Mhm.
And I loved that scene where Lorraine is hanging up sheets and all of a sudden the sky goes black and the sheet flies away and it's on the shape of a person. Love
Mhm.
that. That's what I got.
There was some cool visual stuff in the movie. It wasn't terribly done. The ending was stupid and the Warrens were distracting.
Yeah, I'm gonna end up watching this movie again. It's not a movie that's ever gonna disappear out of my rotation. It's just an every now and then kind of thing.
I won't watch it again.
Next week, we're going to do Annabelle
Mm.
so that we can continue talking about the Warrens.
I will read some more and make myself madder.
So honestly, this month is probably going to be a lot like It month, where we talk about the movie, but we're going to talk a lot about the extra things because really we're here to roast the Warrens posthumously. Rest in pieces or whatever.
Rest in piss. Sorry.
God damn, that was spicy. Anyways, you can find this podcast on Twitter at GIDM Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at WitchXPudding.
Don't follow me, but you can at Nocturnical. I hardly ever post.
She's great. Okay, bye.